There
I'd
we
like
go.
to read a solstice prayer, winter solstice. That's today. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, good idea.
Okay. Today, the winter solstice begins, the sacred celebration of Yule. The longest night of the year unfolds, inviting stillness, reflection, and deep connection with the unseen. All preparations have been made, candles are ready, herbs are gathered, intentions are set. We stand at the threshold between darkness and light, honoring the cycle of death and rebirth. From this moment on, the light slowly returns. The sun is reborn, carrying hope, renewal, and quiet strength. Yule reminds us that even in the deepest darkness, light is never lost. It is simply waiting to rise again. May this sacred turning of the wheel bring warmth to your heart, clarity to your mind, and gentle light to every home. Blessed Yule.
Thank you, Laura. Very nice.
Over to you, Kari.
I will speak briefly on behalf of us darkness people. Tomorrow feels sad to us because the light starts to come back and we love the dark of the year. So I'm happy for sun people being pleased at this transition, but spare us a little bit of a thought. I would like to open with a mantra more than a prayer. It's yeah, I think you've probably all heard me refer to it again, probably or before, and you'll hear it again. It's if you're familiar with the movie or books Dune by Frank Herbert, and there's a Chris knife on the wall back there because I'm such a geek for it. Since we're going to be talking about fear and writing, I'm going to read the litany against fear, which comes from Dune, and I think it's just so it's gotten me through so many times. I think it's incredibly powerful. And I've got it in the chat in case anyone wants to take a look. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. By Frank Herbert. And one thing I love about this is it doesn't say there's no fear. It doesn't say fear is bad. It doesn't say fear is wrong. So I will face it. I will go through it, which I think is one of the things, the most powerful things we can find with writing through fear is it's not turning away from it. It's not pretending it doesn't exist, but it's finding a way to face it and to let it pass through. And I believe to learn the lessons because I think that's one thing fear can bring us is awareness of what sometimes, of course, we don't really live in an era where we're worried about tigers coming after us in most cases, although there are bobcats in the woods out here, and I won't pretend I'm not very, very respectful of those creatures. And we've heard mountain lions. I don't care what anybody says about them not being here. We've heard them. And bears, black bears are right here. But in general, in this era in the United States, physically, we're generally okay. I know there are exceptions, but we also have that mindset that when we get afraid, we're afraid. We're afraid on a gut level. We're afraid in our bones. Our DNA is saying, no, no, there's a tiger, even if it's something very simple or it doesn't look fearful to somebody else. So there are a few things we can talk about that with writing. Um, one of the most universal ones, one of the most obvious ones, is if you're afraid of something, write about it. Just grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, grab your computer, grab your phone. I've been learning dictation over the last few months. So I do a ton of writing, walking around out in the yard with the dogs or in my car. I've written a lot of fiction lately driving in the car, which has been wonderful. It's safety, of course, on the road, but these can be any number of things you're afraid of. It can be teaching a class, which I have been afraid of in the past. Today I was happy and excited because I know you all. This is a subject I've talked a lot about. But you can have fear of giving a speech, getting married, starting a business, going to a doctor if you're afraid of what you're going to hear, going to a funeral, or going on a date, which could be great and exciting. And boy, can it be fearful, or writing a story that you want to write. So, one thing you can do is just sit down. Okay, what am I afraid of? What is actually stopping me? There's no tiger. There's probably not a bear, even if you live here. It's probably okay. But just giving yourself that few minutes can make a big difference. And even while you're writing something like fiction, there was one scene in my second novel that I had to write myself into because I was afraid to write it. I was dreading it. It was an intense and upsetting scene, but I had to sit down and write, "What are you so afraid of?" And wrote a good bit, and then I was fine. Wrote right through the scene. I've never had to do it again in I don't even know how many books. My 50th book is coming out. So it's a lot of books and short stories and things. So that one opportunity of doing that made a huge difference. So all of life's transitions, and they can be major or minor. Like I said, it can be changing your hair color or going to the dentist. Any number of things, large or small, are can be transitions. But putting it into words can make all the difference. And again, that can be dictation. Because if you have a smartphone, there's some kind of app on there that will record. You'll see there's like a little microphone button beside the keyboard. Whatever app you're in, that'll let you record. Same thing if you've got Word, if you've got an iPhone, there's a dictation app built right in and it'll make a transcription. But with this kind of writing, you may not want a transcription. You might just want to get your thoughts out where you can see them, where you can figure out what shape they are, figure out, okay, what is this thing I'm afraid of? Because lots of times, not all the time, lots of times, once you get it out where you can look at it, it becomes minor or it disappears, or you realize this is not really something to be afraid of. It's something I don't know enough about, or something I don't understand, or it's simply new. Because as humans, that can be fearful to us as well. And again, that goes back to those old instinctive fears. Okay, it's pouring rain out here. I really need to go inside for shelter. Look at that cave. That cave looks great, but what's in there? You know, am I more afraid of sitting out here in the dark and freezing or it's pouring snow? Am I more afraid of that or am I more afraid of going in that cave? Because there could be a bear in there. So these are instinctive things that we have to learn to work with. So that's one of the ways I think about it. I've done this since I was very young, since I was in grade school. If I got upset or afraid or worried about something, I would just sit down, write it down. And every time it helps. It just clears it up. And it can work with other emotions as well, anger or agitation or worry or regret, whatever it is. Now, one thing I will say when you go into doing these kinds of writing exercises or speaking, however you decide to do it, be aware that you might be scratching the surface of something significant. You might be poking at a large bear to bring that back up because there have been black bears seen here recently and they should be asleep. So it's a little bit weird, but they wake up during the winter. That's one of the things about black bears as far as fear is they're supposed to be asleep, but they wake up and they're grouchy when they wake up. So you have to watch them. But you might be poking the bear of something, even if you just sit down and write for 5 minutes. So be prepared and be aware of that. And also, if you do poke at something that turns out to be big, that turns out to be much more than you anticipated, you may need support and promise yourself that you will reach out for that support if you need it. If you start, because it's one thing that can happen with these kinds of things, especially morning pages, a practice where you write 3 pages every morning, which I've been doing with dictation again lately. And oh, it's wonderful. It gets the stuff out. But sometimes you can get into something that feels too heavy or too big to deal with by yourself. So just be willing to make yourself that promise, hey, I'll reach out for help because that can help you get into it because you realize, yeah, I know this may be something significant, but I'm not afraid to dig into it because I'll get help. So with all that being said, everybody got something to write with, whether it's keyboard or pen, something available? because I'd like to practice a little bit. I'm going to set a timer on my dictation machine here. There we go.
Thank you.
And we're just going to do about 8 minutes. So not long, not long enough to get stressed about or worried about. And what I'd like you to think about is something you're afraid of. And it can be small or large. It can be significant. It can be something in the past or something that's in front of you right now. But be aware that we've got 8 minutes. And also be aware that you might want to come back to this, especially if you do uncover something that wants more examination. So I'm going to set the timer for 8 minutes and go ahead and write just something that comes to your mind when you think, okay, what's something I'm afraid of? And let's go ahead and start.
Can you give Katrina just a little
Hi,
5 minute clip
Katrina.
or
Hi,
2 minute
Kari.
update?
We're just writing for about 5 more minutes about something that you're afraid of, something that frightens you, whether it's large or small. And there's no requirement to share for everybody. No requirements. So don't feel like you have to edit yourself. This is 100% for you. And you're free to hit delete as soon as you're done. So we're just taking a few quiet moments to write something that frightens you.
Okay.
That's 8 minutes. So take a couple seconds to finish your sentence or your thought. And remember, this is something you can come back to. It's you're under no obligation to delete it. You're also under no obligation to share it. But if you feel like, okay, this is something I really want to dig into, then by all means keep it and go back to it. Everybody at a good stopping place? Okay, great. And again, I'm not going to ask folks to share because that can be difficult, but does anyone have anything you'd like to say about the experience of purposely writing about something that is fearful?
I mainly started with thinking I don't really enjoy writing about things I fear, or I don't acknowledge all the time that I'm fearing something. So when I put things on paper, it's more of I'm thinking through the strategy or the structure, or, in my case, I was talking about producing a podcast, but fearing that I didn't really have enough depth of content. And I've got these people that want to do it with me. And so I was asking all these questions about, well, what if I compare myself to somebody who's wildly successful? Or what if I compare myself to all these male-dominated podcasts, and we're three women, three elder crones that aren't always listened to or understood first. So it's like all of these what ifs, I guess, became my fears that I started talking through. So I was just curious about how you identify when it's a fear or just a barrier to get through.
Those are a lot of times interchangeable because sometimes the fear is, okay, this is something I need to deal with. I'm not like say you don't have a microphone or the correct setup. Okay, that's something you need to deal with. And there
True.
can be a fear of, I don't know how to research this. What you'll often hear is, I can't. And that I can't, I mean, sometimes it's legitimate. I can't dunk a basketball. I can't, I'm not a good bowler. I can't bowl a 300 game, but I can't produce a podcast. Well, what's in the way? What are the barriers? And some of the things may be, yeah, I need a better microphone. I need a headphones or whatever it is. But the other things you're mentioning might just be more things you need to think about because there are some, it's not an easy thing. It feels like an easy thing, but it's not, especially if you have a big goal with it. So I think those two things can be very interchangeable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it also, now you have it where you can look at it.
Hmm.
It's not in the shadows anymore. It's not back there going, ooh. Now you can look at it and go, well, you're in black and white right now, and you're little squiggles on a piece of paper. I can I can rewrite you. I can talk to an expert podcaster. I can read a book. I can dig in and I've got you now. I can figure you out. That's a great example. Anybody else want to don't have to share the writing, but any thoughts about it?
Is this a fear of anything, Carrie?
Absolutely.
So I started to say rats. That's, it's something with their teeth and their tails, that little bleh. But if we talk about my biggest fear, then my biggest fear is confinement.
Oh.
Confinement of any type. So, and I didn't realize that until like I went to basic training, went to the Army right out of high school. And I remember drill sergeant zipped me and my battle buddy up in a tent, pitch black. And that was the first time I got into big trouble because I knocked that thing down in like 30 seconds trying to get out. I remember looking up and just seeing boots. He was standing in front of me, and I was just like, oh. It was just like a panicked response. But the thing that frightens me, like with confinement, like not being able to move, like dark, not being able to see, that feels to me like being buried alive.
Mhm.
And I've done like a lot of past life regression, even like on myself. So I know there's something to it. Just the thought of it makes me panic and like I have to breathe through it. And I'm trying to change that mindset, that claustrophobic mindset of confinement, to remembering that the mind is infinite and powerful and free. And when I do that, I'm able to breathe, but it's breaking free of that whole initial, like I couldn't even sleep with the lights off for a long time until I was in my 20s, just because of that.
Mhm.
So that's my fear.
And what was it like to write about it? Did that help you? I mean, I'm
It
gonna literally, did that help you bring it into the light?
it did. Because I'm like, even now, like being in the dark does not give me that same level of fear of closing up. Um, some days are like better than others. Like sometimes even now, like I'm still gonna sleep in the dark, but I like my windows open so I can see moonlight, you know? And then that I'm just like, huh. Um, Writing about it uh, felt like a little weight being lifted, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Less heavy.
absolutely makes sense. I'm gonna put the litany against fear from Dune in the chat again, if you want to take a look at that, because it sounds to me like you have faced and gone through you've gone through fears.
Mm,
And so that's something it's just called the Litany Against Fear that Frank Herbert wrote in Dune. And that's one thing we can use is, I'm going to face it. I'm going to let that fear go through me. I'm going to go through whatever it is. So it sounds like exactly what you're doing.
hmm
So yeah, just keep that in your back pocket that when something is frightful to you, whether it's right in the moment or it's a larger fear like that, sit down and write about it.
Okay.
Anybody
Katrina,
else?
may I say something on that?
Oh, me? Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So, something that came up for me in listening to you share that is, and I don't know that there's anything to it. This was just something that popped into my head. Is you talking about the fear of being in darkness, and yet when today showing up here today, we can't see you. You're in darkness to me. I didn't know if that maybe that's just a way of you saying I'm not afraid of it anymore.
It took a lot of going through different things, Caitlin, to be honest. Like it used to be I can't say it, debilitating fear. And at this point now, yeah, I've turned it around quite a bit where I make myself be in the dark, but I'm really good with it, right? To me, it used to be like, fear of the dark is a fear of the unknown. Like you have no idea what's happening in dark because everything can happen in the dark, but that's
Mhm.
also the good thing. The good things come out of nothing. It just all like the mind sort of thing. So I'm taming that, but yeah, I like that. I like that thought.
That's good. I'll share mine. It came rather easily to me, um, but I didn't know that I was going to write this. So, Kari, thank you because it brought it into the light for me of what's ruminating in my subconscious all the time. Something I'm afraid of is living my life without fulfilling my higher purpose of reaching a greater mass of people to inspire a revolutionary change of healing through marrying mind, body, and spiritual practices.
That makes sense. I think a lot of what drives me is fear of not doing something. That's a big driver for me. Fear of not accomplishing something or fear of not telling my stories.
Mhm.
That's a big fear for me. Or fear of stopping is a big one, so that makes sense. Okay. So that was useful to you could see how that everyone see that was something that would be helpful in situations like this. Okay, good. Good. And don't feel like it has to be this giant thing. It can be, gosh, I don't want to take my car to the shop because something might be wrong, whatever, which is not a small fear right now. It's completely understandable. Okay. So since it's me doing this, I'm going to turn to writing other things that can have a similar impact, but we can even be afraid of writing something like fiction or nonfiction or memoir. And I will say right up front, I am far more experienced with fiction. I've published a little nonfiction. I've not really done any memoir at all. So when it comes to nonfiction and memoir, you may need to get some advice on things that you don't or do want to write because there are potential issues there with those two. There are other people involved. There are copyright and trademark issues involved. So that's a whole separate thing that I'm not going to get into. But with fiction, a lot of people feel like they want to write fiction or they would like to it, or it's something that they've always wanted to do for whatever reason. But there's so much fear built up about fiction writing, so much. And that's something I definitely have a lot more experience with. So for anyone who does want to write fiction or who's ever thought of maybe doing creative nonfiction, which could certainly be a way to get something across, like Caitlin was talking about. Um, I read a book when I was in high school called Trinity by Leon Uris. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but it was a fictionalized account of historical events in Great Britain. And it was things that actually happened. Reading that book helped me in a British history class. That's how set in reality it was. So we can do things like that. One of the things I wish our school systems would do would be to hire fiction writers to write history stories for children, because that would be such a great way for them to learn the history and to learn to enjoy writing or reading, excuse me, because lots of history books are pretty dull. They're pretty boring and hard to get through, even as, later high school students and college students as adults. Some of that stuff is hard to read. So why can't we make it into a more enjoyable fictional form for children? So creative nonfiction is definitely an option if you're not interested in pure fiction. But for anyone who's got aspirations to write anything like that, are there things you're afraid of with that?
Oh, anyway, Carrie, can you hear me?
I can.
Um, yeah, I have a fear to share, but before I do that, I'd like to know what the sword behind you means for you. Why do you have that hanging there?
That is a crysknife from the story Dune. It's theoretically the sandworm's tooth. of the Litany Against Fear that I read earlier. It's the same writer,
Hmm.
and it's a huge part of the story. It's a big part of becoming accepted in the culture, becoming accepted in the society. It's probably because I just love those stories so much.
The Dune story. I've been just watching that recently. Yeah, I'm amazed at how popular it is and how people
It's
really get into that.
it's endured for a long time. It's some amazing stories.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
really is.
It's kind of, repetitious, right, of every life. But anyway, when I use a sword, I've used it in the sense of healing, and I use it to break up what's called the fowler's net. And the Bible talks about, like fish being caught in the net. And we as human beings sometimes our addictions are we get caught up in things we don't know how to get out of. And in a healing practice, I use that to cut the net open and free the spirit. Anyway, now regarding my fear, I have my beautiful little girl dog sitting in my lap. She's like 11, 12 months old, and we're really bonded. We are very close. Um, we've known since the first visit to the vet that she's had some liver trouble. And each time we go back to the vet, it's improved a lot. And I haven't been too worried about her because she behaves normally. She's a lot of fun. She has a lot of energy. But right now, she hasn't eaten and she refuses to eat. And she's just sitting quietly in my lap. And well, now she's playing with, wants to bite my cuff. But yeah, it would trouble me quite a lot, I'm sure, if something happened where she got very ill or had to die. So I guess, I don't have fear of my own death. I didn't have fear of my wife's death, but I'm concerned about her death. Isn't that crazy? It's the way life is, I guess, huh?
It's not crazy at all. We have two rescue dogs here right now, and we've had several other ones. And yeah, I had one who was when we rescued her, she had, I don't know what she'd gone through, but she was terrified of lots of things. She was scared of everybody but the two of us and scared of so many situations, but she was so courageous, which I hope the love and support we showed her helped. But I was so struck by she would be terrified of a situation and she would do it anyway, which doesn't mean we have to do the things we're afraid of. But I learned so much from watching her. So yeah, our animal companions.
Yeah. And I also want to address, you brought up fiction versus nonfiction. I've written several books and they've all been nonfiction. And when I write nonfiction, yeah, I'm a little concerned about revealing personal things that may affect somebody else. But I move through that because it's all about life. And and if I'm really concerned about um, somebody else, I might change the name of the circumstance a little bit, but still tell the story.
Right.
And anytime I've written, it's like organic. It's like I start out, I have no understanding where it's going to end. It just grows, and
Mhm.
that's what worked for me. But I would have probably have a problem trying to do nonfiction or fiction. Um, I don't know why. I belonged once to an organization where a woman that belonged to that organization was a writer, and she wrote a lot of fiction, semi-fiction, but it was always about black, cutting up bodies, putting them in the refrigerator, and all that stuff. So she asked me to proof her stuff, not that. I thought, oh my God, I'm the last person in the world that I wouldn't want to write about that. Now I'm reading about it. But it was interesting, and I'm not sure if whatever input I gave her, I don't remember, but it was really weird coming from fiction to nonfiction and nonfiction to fiction. And I don't, I can watch movies that are violent or do dastardly things. In fact, I watch Kari in the morning sometimes. He's the writer, for the Washington Post or something, and he does a great job on presenting what's going on in the world today. But he's always dealing with the darkness. It's like, we're not providing sustenance or food or aid to Ethiopia and all these places, or the Gaza Strip, or what's going on in Australia, about the ISIS or the people that are attacking the Jews, and it's always dealing with that, and he's always having a prominent person in the field speak about it. And I like that from an educational point of view, but it sure makes you look at the grim side of life. And God knows my years, I've experienced a lot of the benefits of life, the joys of life, the families. Sure, there's suffering along the way, and there's things that we've all feared that we have to deal with, no matter where we live. But by and by, if you've lived here in the U.S., you feel relatively safe. You don't feel like you're going to be bombed. Well, I went through the Cold War, so that's not always true. So I'm rattling on, so I'll shut up.
That's okay. I think one of the things that can drive a fiction writer is curiosity and also a desire to write through something that we're afraid of because that lessens the fear. And I've never set out to do that, but I'll, in retrospect, go, oh, I see what I was doing there. Because I do let just my subconscious go. I don't plot, I don't plan. And sometimes I'll get to the other side of a story and, whoa, what did I do there? Or it's one that I was fine writing, but when I go back and read it, it hits me very emotionally. Or there's a couple that I could never read out loud, ever, ever. But there are some that feel very, and it was good to write, and I feel myself moving through things. So,
Do you think some of that may come from your past life experiences?
I think mainly it's just the way I view it is there's a little girl in the back of my head who runs the writing machine,
Mm,
and
okay.
it's like a kid out in the yard, which we're all old enough to remember running loose and playing and not being supervised. So that's the little girl in my head who, okay, I picked up this rock. What does this rock do? I want to know what that. Oh, look at that spider web. What does this spider web do? So that's much more my perspective of it is what's caught her interest today. And I want her to play and have fun. I don't ever want to put a roadblock in front of her.
You like the freedom of your little child, yeah.
She is way smarter than me. The part of me that writes knows so much more about writing, about life. She's so much more observant. I learn from her. So
Yeah, one thing I've learned about facing fear is it works great is when I used to record dreams for many years and try to understand what they meant, and etc. And I always had this reoccurring dream, always. I'm running. I'm running. Doesn't matter what country or where I'm at, I'm always on the go, getting away. And so one evening I decided to program myself and said, okay, I want you to face your fear. I want you to turn around and acknowledge whoever is chasing you. And once I did that, the dreams stop reoccurring. Isn't that amazing?
Mine is elevators,
Yeah.
recurring elevator dreams. So, and one way I did face that was I've written a couple stories that involved elevators. That was hard because I am literally afraid of them. So that was, and I wrote them both to be menacing because I was going into that fear. So yeah, you never know. You never know. But as far as writing fiction, which is generally just making stuff up, I mean, sometimes you might have, sometimes I'll have a person in mind. And like you said, Charlie, I'll change their gender, I'll change their name, I'll change their, so they become unidentifiable. And I've had several times the person I was writing about read it and not recognize themselves, which is great. But we're just making stuff up most of the time. So the fears don't really make sense. What a lot of aspiring writers or writers fear is, but what if someone doesn't like it? What if I get this thing wrong? What if someone is offended? Whatever it is, nothing will happen. Sorry.
Right. What if they retaliate? Like if you say write something or say something against our president, he will retaliate. You can bet on that. It's his
We
nature.
we published a book a few years ago about the vice president, and no one's done a thing, and it sold really well.
Hmm.
And that was nonfiction. That's a whole other world now.
Wow.
A whole other world. Not we, my uncle wrote. I did not write. But with fiction, there I read a fantastic science fiction story that was very clearly about our president. It was amazing. One of my favorite science fiction stories I've ever read. What happened was the author got it published in a magazine. Nothing has happened.
Hmm.
It's fiction. And
Yeah.
you couldn't prove that. You couldn't prove that that's what it, but it was so clearly. And it was brilliant. It was hilarious. It was cathartic to read it. It was so good.
Yeah. It's amazing the talent that people have to do that. Yeah.
And part of it is getting past the fear and getting out of your own way. That's a huge part of fiction writing is being out of your own way because we put up roadblocks for ourselves. Think about that little toddler I was talking about who runs the writing machine. That's also the kid that we were and have possibly seen who want to take off their clothes and run down the street. You know, we have to, as in that situation, we have to corral them a little bit. We have to, we can't do that. We have to watch out for cars. We have to watch out for things. But when it comes to my imagination in my mind, that parental voice is not helpful. That parental voice becomes a critical voice. And my job is to stop that parental voice when it comes to writing fiction and to let that toddler know, that little girl know, hey, it's playtime. What I One big thing I do is I write on this iPad mini. That's my writing machine. So when this comes out, the critical voice is not welcome.
Mm.
So that's and that's worked really well for me because I don't use that iPad for anything else. I don't use it for reading. I don't use it for surfing the internet. I don't use it for anything else. If I need to do research, I go to my laptop.
Can you dictate on it?
Absolutely. I do all the time. Mhm.
That's great.
Oh,
Have
it's
you used artificial intelligence?
never,
Never. Okay.
never, because I want my mind to have the fun. And I
Okay.
want to be able to copyright things and I want to be able to, and the way, let me back up. Generative AI, things like ChatGPT are built on stolen fiction. They stole, I mean, some of my books were stolen to train it. So I'm not going to be part of that at all because I was a victim of it and I'm not going to hurt other writers. Same thing with art. Art has been stolen for generative AI. Now, things like people are starting to be able to clone their own voices for audiobooks. That has been built ethically. That AI has been built by paying the voice actors, by paying the artists. So that's a whole different field. But I'm not going to use anything where theft is involved. But I think it has potential in other fields for sure. But with creativity, I want us to rely on our minds. I want us to rely on our humanity. So that's the short for me, but long-winded answer.
Yeah. So as a little girl, did you run naked down the street?
I remember doing it,
Yeah.
but it was the 70s. We all did. Don't you remember everybody was streaking?
Yeah.
There was a song about the streak.
Yeah. When I was like in the first grade, the girl of my age that lived behind me, convinced me to skip school and go to her house and play doctor and nurse and in the closet.
Yes, different eras.
Yeah. I mean, that's nonfiction, but it was interesting.
And that could be an interesting story. See, that's I have picked incidents out of my life and written them into fiction. Or normally what happens, I'm writing a story and an incident out of my life will pop into my mind. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I need. Or a person or a setting, something that I experienced will pop into my mind. And using that without fear is one of the keys to really getting into to a story. Because truthfully, you're making things up. Things like um, if I write a story set in Atlanta, which I frequently do because we lived there for a long time, oh my gosh, what if I get that intersection wrong? Who cares? It's fiction. This is not a travel guide. And I have several fictional towns set in Appalachia where we live. So I can't get the intersection wrong. If someone comes and tells me you got there, I made this up. This exists in my mind. So that frees up, takes away that fear. Or things like, oh my gosh, what if you get the detail wrong on that car? Well, okay, but in this world, there's unicorns. So it's just freeing yourself, especially if you're writing fantasy. There's already unicorns. So why are you worried about the door handle on this car? So just kind of identifying those roadblocks, those critical voices that can stop us, and finding ways to charge forward to give that little girl in the back of my mind all the freedom she needs. Because, like I said, she is way better at storytelling than I would ever be.
What I'm amazed at with fiction um, is like creation of Star Wars. Where'd they come up with that?
I can
When,
tell you in this case, I can tell you, George Lucas drew from so many other sources. If you start looking into the origins of Star Wars, it came from other writers, it came from older stories, it came from older mythology that was already existing in the world. And that is not to put him down at all, because I love Star Wars, but he drew voraciously from other sources. So
so
that's a fascinating
where did the
example.
other sources come up with, people from different planets that look different? Or, I mean, that doesn't come out of any direct experience of life that I'm aware of.
It's just I've written several science fiction stories myself, and it a lot of it is what you wish would be, or you extrapolate, okay, with if this particular thing goes on, where will it end up? And start playing with it there. Or just imagining, gosh, if you look at Earth, some of the climates here are just like I could go from what Yosemite to Death Valley in one day. Think about the difference between those two climates and the creatures that live there. Or I could go to, we've been lucky enough to go to South Africa, and I've been to Bali. Such different climates just on this planet. And that's before we get into things like cave systems and what is it? There's a lake close to Yosemite in California that's, oh, I can't remember the name of it, but very, very difficult um, climate for life, but there is life there. And just look at all the creatures on our planet. I mean, the microbes in our eyebrows, and there are, to things like the bears out in the woods, to the oak tree or the mushrooms and things that grow under the ground and pop up somewhere else, and just all the insects. And it just takes a few minutes of looking up strange life forms if you want to, and go, your imagination's off and running. There was a
Yeah,
wonderful
I
story.
can I can get that. When you're experiencing this on our planet, right? But how do you come up with something from another planetary system? How do you travel there in your mind and come up with creatures that were never experienced before?
Just tell myself a story.
I guess. And then some of the stories become real later on. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Star Trek. Now you talk about Star Trek for
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
have come into reality. But yeah,
Right.
I just tell myself a story. I mean, some of the fantasy stories I've come up with are far more uh, out there than any science fiction because we
Yeah.
can do anything in fantasy. We don't have to worry about the laws of physics.
Yeah. Well,
So
thank
that's,
you for sharing your
oh,
interests and background and about fiction.
well, one of
Have
the,
any of your books been commercially successful?
I've had several that would be considered a bestseller for sure.
Good. That's great.
Yeah, I had a Kickstarter recently that was quite successful, and it's just a matter of keep it
Yeah.
practicing. Because the thing with fiction is the only way to fail really with writing fiction is to stop.
Mm,
That's the way you fail. If I tell a story that doesn't work, so
yeah.
what? Nobody will buy it. Who cares? If
Yeah.
I tell a story that for some reason is unsatisfying to Kevin, Laura might absolutely love it. So, and you know what's most important in this case? I loved writing it. I write them for me. But that's something that we can all do. We can all do. In fact, I'm going to put a link to a YouTube video in the chat that comes from Alan Moore, who wrote The Watchmen. There was a movie a few years ago. It was a series of graphic novels. He wrote V is for Vendetta, several things he's written. Very, very well-known writer. But he talks about how magical writing is. Because if you think about, lately I've been reading older books. We saw Anne of Green Gables as a play a couple months ago, and I realized I'd never read the book. I'm sure Kevin's familiar with it. But I went home that night, got the book from the library, and started reading it. So this is a woman who passed away quite some time ago, Lucy Maud Montgomery. She's been gone for a while, but her mind touched my mind because I was reading her book. So through her, I was living in late 19th century Prince Edward Island. I've been to Prince Edward Island, but not in the late 19th century. And I
Hmm.
also reread The Thornbirds by Colleen McCullough. Anyone remember that one from oh my gosh. And it was such a treat to read. I really enjoyed rereading it. But I was living in New Zealand and Australia from 1915 on, and Colleen McCullough's gone. But she put that in my mind. And I'm
Yeah.
currently reading, I'm reading Lady Chatterley's Lover. I've never read that before. It's
Hmm.
very interesting. So I'm in post-World War I England, but it's like it is time travel. I'm reading the words, I'm having the experiences that this writer wanted me to have 100 years ago. That's amazing. That's and they're putting me into places, I mean, without even talking about fantasy and science fiction. They're putting me into places I've never been, and my mind is there. Reading and writing grow our empathy because we put ourselves into other people's consciousness. We let ourselves live other people's lives. We live other genders, we live other societies, we live other cultures. And like saying with fantasy and science fiction, I live places that have never existed. So, and as you read those things, our minds are connecting. So
Hmm.
it is just magical. And it's one of I think it's a great gift
I
we
do
can give
have some Canadian history with St. Edward's Island, etc. But what I wanted to say about Dunes, what I watched about it, it has a lot to do with the liberation of women. Yeah. So history, even though it's fiction, is repeating something that's going on in our psyche.
That's one thing that Alan Morris says in the video that I shared, that writing can change human consciousness, writing
Yeah.
your own as well as other people's. It can
Yeah.
change
If
um,
I
It could change the way people view things. It can make a real difference, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, memoir, whatever it is. But if you read one of my stories set in Appalachia and you've never set foot here, you're going to have the experience that you wouldn't have had any other way. And that's mind contact. If I read Shakespeare or watch one of the plays, I'm having an experience with someone who passed away hundreds of years ago. Or listen to Mozart even. That goes the same way. So that creativity, that storytelling urge that's baked into us
And look,
has a
look, the ministry is the same idea, right? The Divine Mother, you take her back to wherever you want. And we're really, a lot of it is a bit about empowering women to move forward in their lives. So it's all integrated somehow.
Mhm.
I've been listening to some podcasts. I've been listening to some podcasts on physicists debating the truth of linear physics versus quantum physics and how the difference between those experiences bring up, like you said, these different or alternate realities or dimensions that absolutely go down the path of these lives have been here before, or, people going into maybe psychedelics or experiencing a little bit different dimensional work and can come up with a lot of these ancient wisdoms of things that may or may not have existed before. It's
Well, one of
fascinating.
my favorite short story series that I write, I was walking through the kitchen one day and someone was talking on the Science Friday program, talking about the multiverse.
Hmm.
And something about that sparked in my mind. That's where it comes from, Charlie, is one odd thing and another odd thing will get together and spark in my mind.
Yeah,
Oh, oh, you know,
yeah,
or I'll be writing something and I'll see something in the yard, or I'll watch a movie or hear something in music, or just something that I learned 15 years ago will pop into my head and it makes that creative spark. And that's a lot of times where these things come from. So it's just not being afraid of what your mind's going to come up with, because it might be something intense or dark or frightening or joyful and ecstatic, and just not being afraid to go with it, not being afraid to follow where that creative spark has taken you. Anybody else have any
Thank you.
questions about? Oh, thank you. Anybody else have any questions about fiction writing or fear, things like that?
we've inspired some more inspiration.
I hope so.
Fits right
And
into our series.
good. And the fear block goes for publishing as well. If you get far enough down the road to start thinking about publishing, it can be so fearful, but there's no reason to be afraid. Like I said, if I write a bad story or a story that doesn't work for somebody, and I don't want to say there's a bad story, and publish it, so what? What's going to happen? I'm not spending thousands of dollars on editors. I do my own covers. Thankfully, I have my husband here is another writer, so he can proofread. What have I lost? I've written that story. I had that experience that I wanted to have. Or fear of rejection. If you're submitting stories to magazines, I wouldn't really submit to traditional publishers for books. But if you want to submit short stories to magazines and they reject it, so what? You send it out again. So many of the fears that stop us are artificial. We put those roadblocks up, or we assume there's a tiger in that under that bridge, and there's not. So, and one thing about being a writer, being a creative person who does this routinely, I can figure out more ways things can go wrong than you can imagine. So I do have to get past that fear, because my mind will go, well, this could happen or this could happen. This, okay, it's okay. That's great in fiction, but we're in real life now. So it can be just a lot of fun to explore what if or wish fulfillment. Gosh, I wish I could do this thing. Okay, write a story that where you do it.
Have you ever had creative block?
I have never.
Well,
I never. I've had times where I was too busy, or not too busy, I don't even want to say that, where life was overwhelming. But I will say in a few days here on December 24th, I will I will get to the point where I've written every single day for 7 years
Hmm.
without missing a day, at least 250 words, more often 1,000 or 2,000 words. But I've never missed a day. And part of that is I want to make it as routine as brushing my teeth. Because then, because I don't feel like there's anything like a muse. I don't have to have this grand inspiration. I just show up. I show up at the keyboard. I show up at the
Yeah.
microphone, and it's play. I get to play.
You demonstrated your passion beautifully.
Oh, thank you. And if anyone has questions about fiction or publishing, I'm happy to. I mean, I'm not a critic. I'm not a proofreader. I'm not that person. But as far as writing and getting things out into the world, I do know a good bit about that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you. And also, and do take a look at that Alan Moore video. It's really interesting. This is the way he talks about and the way he says writer. I'm not even going to try to say it, but it's just he's got a whole big series on YouTube. This is the one that I thought was most relevant. So we can use writing to face our own fears,
Yeah.
but don't let fear stop you from writing in the first place. So I hope that helped.
Thank
So
you.
much. Appreciate
I hope that helped.
do that newsletter
Yeah,
overview. Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
And before we go, Cindy called this morning and asked me to ask for prayers for her daughter's best friend, who's in the hospital fighting to save her fetus.
Oh,
And I would like to ask for prayers for my daughter, who's fighting an internal infection that just doesn't want to go away.
Okay.
Her name is Jennifer.
So maybe that can be sent out to on email to and ask people to pray.
Okay. Yeah, and Paula had one last week with another family member that's been ill. So
Good.
lots going on at year end. And so sorry to you've lost your kitty, Laura. That's very heartbreaking.
There's
But
the
she's already
indentation
come back to
on it,
kiss you. Yes.
the indentation in the couch right there where she always sat when I was on Zoom.
Yeah.
It's always hard.
Yeah. Anyway,
Right. Have a wonderful week, everybody.
happy
Thanks,
solstice.
everybody.
Yes. Yes.
Happy
Love to
holidays.
all. All right.
Yep.
Bye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you.
Thank